Hi everyone. The purpose of this video is 1. To review the sequence of events that have led to the passing of the new Hate Crime Act in Ireland. 2. To review all 3 voting records, 2 in the Dáil and 1 in the Seanad, that have contributed to the passing of this legislation. 3. To examine the content of the new Hate Crime Act and how it may potentially be used to criminalise speech. And 4. To discuss the multiple different pieces of legislation that the Gardaí and the government currently have at their disposal to criminalise speech, regardless of the fact that the hate speech element of this bill has not been passed. So we will begin by reviewing the sequence of events that have led to the passing of the new Hate Crime Act in Ireland. On the 24th of October 2019, then Minister for Justice Charlie Flanagan initiated a public consultation on hate speech and hate crime in Ireland, whereby members of the public were asked to submit their views on whether Ireland's freedom of expression laws should be updated or not. As the responses to this consultation were made public, as is the norm, Gript Media, having carried out a review of the submissions, reported that 73% of respondents did not support the government's plan to introduce so-called hate speech laws. Regardless of this fact, the Irish government decided to completely disregard the opinions of the public and pressed ahead with what was described as the most draconian hate speech laws the world over. The proposed hate speech, hate crime bill, then titled the Criminal Justice Incitement to Violence or Hatred and Hate Offences Bill 2022, was first published on the 1st of November 2022 when it came before Stage 1 of the Dáil. By the 26th of April 2023, the bill had passed all 5 stages in Dail Eireann, with 110 TDs voting in favour of the bill and only 14 TDs voting against, noting that this was the first of 3 votes that took place to allow this legislation be passed. The bill then came before Stage 1 of the Seanad on the 26th of April 2023, but due to significant domestic and international pressure, the bill remained at Stage 3 of the Seanad for 16 months, between the 21st of June 2023 and the 16th of October 2024. During this 16-month period, government TDs, opposition TDs, academics, people in media, international commentators such as Elon Musk, Michael Schellenberger, Andy Ngo, Andrew Doyle and others, and most importantly the public, raised significant concerns regarding the proposed new laws. All of this pressure culminated in the current Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee, who was also the main instigator of these laws, agreeing to delete significant elements of the bill, namely the hate speech elements, in order to get the bill passed by the Seanad. Once the deletion of the hate speech elements of the bill was made public, McEntee quickly moved to have the bill agreed by the Seanad, and in this regard the second vote took place in the Seanad on the 16th of October 2024. Unfortunately, we do not know exactly how many senators voted in favour or against the proposed law due to the procedure used to count votes in the Dáil and the Seanad. So once a debate on a proposed law is finished in the Seanad, the chair of the Seanad is required to ask the members of the Seanad in attendance if the bill is to be passed, and he judges if a majority of the members present agree to the proposed law being passed. When the chair declares his answer, any senator can ask for an official vote record to be obtained. This is called a division. But for this official recorded vote to take place, whereby we would be able to secure the names of the people who voted in favour and against these laws, there needs to be a minimum of 5 senators requesting this official vote record. On the evening of the 16th of October, when this highly debated and controversial piece of legislation was being argued in the Seanad, there were only 4 senators in attendance who appeared to oppose this bill, meaning that they did not have the minimum 5 number senators required to call for an official vote. So we cannot say for certain how many senators voted in favour or against this law. But from reviewing the Seanad debates, it is possible that up to 10 senators voted in favour of this law and only 4 voted against. So to put this into context, senators are paid a basic salary of €80,000 and can claim up to €40,000 in expenses. Added to this are all kinds of extra top-ups and allowances, so in many cases senators are taking home in excess of €120,000 a year, paid for by you, the taxpayer. The rate of pay that these people are on makes their non-attendance at a monumental debate and vote such as this one all the more egregious. To be clear, there are 60 senators and a maximum of 14 showed up for this vote. This tells you everything you need to know about politics in Ireland and the utter disdain and disrespect these people have for you, the electorate, the taxpayer, the person who they are trying to impose these laws on. So once this proposed law was passed in the Seanad, and because amendments were made to the proposed law in the Seanad, namely the deletion of the hate speech elements of the bill had to go back to the Dáil to be voted on again. So the third and final debate and vote on the proposed law took place on the 23rd of October 2024, when 78 TDs voted in favour and 52 TDs voted against this law. Thereafter, on the 29th of October 2024, Michael D. Higgins, President of Ireland, signed the bill into law, noting that he could have referred this bill to the Supreme Court to test its constitutionality, but he chose not to. Finally, just to note that although this bill is now law, Helen McEntee must issue a commencement order by statutory instrument, setting out the date that this new Criminal Justice Hate Offences Act 2024 will become operational from. Although she has yet to issue this commencement order, there is no doubt that she will do so before the general election at the end of this month in order to save face before the electorate. Next, we will review all three voting records that have contributed to the passing of this legislation. As stated earlier, the first vote took place in the Dáil on the 26th of April 2023 and was passed by 110 TDs in favour and only 14 TDs against. When this particular vote took place, the bill was titled the Criminal Justice, Incitement to Violence or Hatred and Hate Offences Bill 2022, and at this time the bill included all kinds of truly totalitarian restrictions on free speech. The reason I am pointing this out is because far more TDs voted in favour of this bill in April 2023, when it included far more restrictions on free speech, than when the hate speech elements of the bill were removed in October 2024. And the reason for this has little to do with protecting your right to free speech and everything to do with the mounting pressure these TDs were coming under. So on the screen you can see the TDs who voted in favour of introducing hate speech laws on the 26th of April 2023, laws which at the time were described as the most extreme and oppressive laws the world over. So at the time of the vote, Fianna Fáil had 35 TDs. 32 turned up for the vote and all 32 voted to pass this law. At the time of the vote, Fine Gael had 32 TDs. 27 turned up for the vote and all 27 voted to pass this law. At the time of the vote, the Green Party had 12 TDs. 10 TDs turned up for the vote and all 10 voted to pass this law. At the time of this vote, Labour had 6 TDs. 4 turned up for the vote and all 4 voted to pass this law. At the time of the vote, the Social Democrats had 6 TDs. 4 turned up for the vote and all 4 voted to pass this law. In addition, 5 independent TDs voted to pass this law. And finally, Sinn Féin, the so-called opposition, had 33 TDs in the Dáil at the time of this vote, 28 of which turned up for this vote, and all 28 voted in favour of passing hate speech laws. The second vote took place in the Seanad on the 16th of October 2024, noting that by this time the title of the bill had changed from the Criminal Justice, Incitement to Violence or Hatred and Hate Offences Bill 2022 to the Criminal Justice Hate Offences Bill 2022. The reason for this, as explained earlier, is because the hate speech elements of the bill were removed before the Seanad vote took place on the 16th of October 2024. Also, as stated earlier, we do not know exactly how many senators voted in favour or against the proposed law due to the procedure used to count votes in the Dáil and the Seanad. That said, it is fair to assume that the senators who called for the official vote to be recorded most likely voted against these laws, and this includes the following senators: Sharon Keoghan, Ronan Mullen, Michael McDowell and Fintan Warfield. The third and final vote, which took place for a second time in the Dáil, occurred on the 23rd of October 2024, when 78 TDs voted in favour and 52 TDs voted against the Criminal Justice Hate Offences Bill 2022. Now, this vote is particularly interesting because, as stated earlier, 110 TDs voted to pass the Criminal Justice Incitement to Violence or Hatred and Hate Offences Bill 2022, and only 14 TDs voted against, whereas only 78 TDs voted to pass the Criminal Justice Hate Offences Bill 2022 and 52 TDs voted against. And the reason this is interesting is because the April 2023 bill contained far more restriction on free speech than the October 2024 bill. So let's take a look at who changed their position and who did not. So on the screen you can see the TDs who voted in favour of passing the Hate Crime Act on the 23rd of October 2024. At the time of the vote, Fianna Fáil had 36 TDs. 29 turned up for this vote and all 29 voted to pass this law, noting that Fianna Fáil did not change their position on this bill. At the time of the vote, Fine Gael had 33 TDs, 28 of which turned up for this vote and all 28 TDs voted to pass this law. Again, Fine Gael did not change their position on this bill. At the time of the vote, the Green Party had 12 TDs, 10 of which turned up for the vote and all 10 voted to pass this law, and again the Green Party did not change their position on this bill. At the time of the vote, Labour had 6 TDs, 5 of which turned up for the vote and all 5 voted to pass this law. Again, Labour did not change their position on this bill. And finally, at the time of the vote, the Social Democrats had 6 TDs and all 6 turned up for the vote and all 6 voted to pass this law, and again the Social Democrats did not change their position on this bill. So the only TDs who changed their position between April 2023 and October 2024 were independent TDs and Sinn Féin. So in April 2023, the following independent TDs voted to restrict your speech: Cathal Berry, Sean Canny, Michael Lowry and Patricia Ryan. Whereas during the vote in October 2024, no independent TD voted in favour of the hate crime bill, but the following independent TDs did not bother to show up for the vote: Verona Murphy, Cathal Berry, Peter Fitzpatrick, Dennis Naughton, Matt Shanahan and Brian Stanley. As I said earlier, the decision by some independents and Sinn Féin to vote against the hate crime bill had little to do with protecting your right to free speech and a lot to do with the mounting pressure they were coming under. And this is very evident by the fact that they voted in favour of the hate crime bill when it included significant restrictions on free speech in April 2023, but voted against it in October 2024. Now we will take a look at the content of the Hate Crime Act and how it may potentially be used to criminalise speech. So when the bill was published in April 2023, it was separated into 4 parts. Part 1 was titled Preliminary and General and contained issues such as a definition section. Part 2 was titled Prohibition of Incitement to Violence or Hatred and included sections on A. Creating a new offence of incitement to violence or hatred based on a person communicating material to the public in a manner likely to incite violence or hatred against a person based on their protected characteristics. B. Creating a new offence of condonation, denial or gross trivialisation of genocide, a crime against humanity, a war crime, etc., against persons on account of their protected characteristics. And C. Creating a new offence of preparing or possessing material likely to incite violence or hatred. Part 3 was titled Offences Aggravated by Hatred and provided for the creation of new aggravated forms of certain existing criminal offences where those offences were said to be motivated by prejudice against a protected characteristic. And Part 4 was titled Amendments of Other Enactments. So on the screen you can see a comparison between the bill when it was passed by 110 TDs in April 2023 and the bill that has now become law. The differences are as follows. 1. The title to the bill has changed from the Criminal Justice Incitement to Violence or Hatred and Hate Offences Bill 2022 to the Criminal Justice Hate Offences Bill 2022. 2. The original bill intended to repeal the Prohibition of Incitement to Hatred Act 1989, but the bill that has been passed will not repeal this act. So what this means is that the new Criminal Justice Hate Offences Act 2022 and the Prohibition of Incitement to Hatred Act 1989 will both be available for use or abuse by the Gardaí. 3. The entirety of Part 2 of the original bill has been deleted. This was the section that was intended to introduce the new offence of hate speech. 4. Very little of Part 3, which is the section of the bill that introduces hate crime, has been amended, as you can see from the screen. And 5. There has been very little amendment to Part 4, except for deleting amendments to the Broadcasting Act 2009. So, in essence, the new Criminal Justice Hate Offences Act 2022 primarily does 3 things. 1. It fractures society into various groups based on identity characteristics and the historical oppression markers associated with those characteristics, including the following: race, colour, nationality, religion, national or ethnic origin, descent, gender, sex characteristics, sexual orientation and disability. And it uses these identity characteristics to determine who should be granted more or less justice before the law. It's important to note that Helen McEntee has changed the meaning of gender, which for all of time has meant male or female, to the gender of a person, or the gender which a person expresses as the person's preferred gender or with which the person identifies, and includes transgender and a gender other than those of male and female. Besides the absolute lunacy of this definition, it will no doubt have knock-on effects to current and future laws regarding the meaning of gender. 2. The Act creates new aggravated forms of certain existing criminal offences, where those offences are said to be motivated by prejudice against a protected characteristic. So sections 5, 6 and 7 of the Act essentially bring to life the new offence of hate crime in Ireland by saying that if a person commits any of the offences listed on the screen, which includes the likes of damaging property, threatening, abusive or insulting behaviour in a public place, distributing or displaying in a public place material which is threatening, abusive, insulting or obscene, assault, harassment and so on, and if the carrying out of any of these offences is found to be aggravated by hatred, which is undefined, then the person found guilty would be subject to a harsher fine and prison sentence. So the net effect of hate crime is to create a hierarchy of justice, whereby a person who can lay claim to more protected characteristics can claim more justice. And it also desecrates the legal and constitutional principle that all men are to be treated equal before the law, and indeed that justice is no longer blind. It's also important to note that there does not need to be a direct victim for a prosecution under the Hate Crime Act to take place, as the Act states that in many cases a prosecution may be taken whether or not there is a specific victim of the offence. This means that the legislation encourages members of the public who are not directly impacted by the alleged harmful communication to take offence on somebody else's behalf and pursue a prosecution accordingly. So this means that even if a person were to hold a sign in a public place disputing the fact that there are more than 2 genders, this could be considered a hate crime. Because A, Section 6 of the Act states that it will be a hate crime to display in a public place material which is abusive or insulting, and B, Section 6 also confirms that no specific victim is needed to prosecute this as a hate crime. 3. So while Sections 5, 6 and 7 set out specific offences that will carry harsher penalties if they are found to be aggravated by hatred, Section 8 is a general provision that allows the courts to treat evidence of hatred as an aggravating factor in sentencing any other offence not captured by Sections 5, 6 or 7. So what this means is that a person found guilty of any offence can receive a harsher sentence if it is decided that the offence was aggravated, even in part by hatred of a person or a group of persons because of their race, their colour, their nationality, their religion, and so on. So to be clear, once Helen McEntee issues the commencement order for the Hate Crime Act, literally every offence currently on the Irish statute books can be treated as a hate crime and punishments handed down accordingly. In the final section of this video, I will briefly outline the multiple different pieces of legislation that the Government and the Gardai currently have at their disposal to criminalise speech, regardless of the fact that the hate speech elements of this bill have not been passed. A. The Prohibition of Incitement to Hatred Act 1989, which states that it is an offence to communicate threatening, abusive or insulting material that is intended or likely to stir up hatred against a group of people because of their race, colour, nationality, religion, ethnic or national origins, membership of the travelling community or sexual orientation, noting that the communication can be spoken, in writing, broadcast or part of a recording. It's important to note that one of the main reasons Helen McEntee wanted to introduce specific hate speech laws in Ireland is because it has been difficult to secure successful prosecutions under the 1989 Act for alleged hate speech. B. The Criminal Justice Hate Offences Act 2022, which will allow the Gardaí to essentially prosecute individuals for hate speech under sections 6A for threatening, abusive or insulting behaviour in a public place, or 7A for distributing or displaying in a public place material which is threatening, abusive, insulting or obscene, or 10B for harassment, noting again that there does not need to be a victim for any of these alleged crimes to be prosecuted. C. The Criminal Justice Hate Offences Act 2022, which through Section 8 allows the court to treat evidence of hatred as an aggravating factor in sentencing any other offence not captured by Sections 5, 6 or 7 of the Act. So this Section 8 effectively allows the courts to treat every offence currently on the Irish statute books as a hate crime when it comes to sentencing. D. The piece of legislation that I am most concerned about is the Harassment, Harmful Communications and Related Offences Act 2020, which was signed into law on the 28th of December 2020 at the height of the COVID-19 restrictions, while many of us, myself included, were distracted. This act is primarily concerned with criminalising the distribution or publication of intimate images without consent, and as such was passed by the Dáil and the Seanad in December 2020 with little controversy. However, Section 4 of this Act also introduced a new offence of distributing, publishing or sending threatening or grossly offensive communications with the intent of causing harm, noting that Section 4.2 states that a person intends to cause harm where they intentionally, seriously interfere with the other person's peace and privacy or causes alarm or distress to the other person. Under this legislation, a person could be subject to a sentence of up to 2 years in prison for sending a grossly offensive communication. However, it's important to note that Section 8 of the new Hate Crime Act could also be utilised by the court to impose a more significant sentence if it is found that a person sent a grossly offensive communication to another person or about another person on account of their race, colour, nationality, religion and so on. In my view, this legislation was introduced specifically to quell freedom of speech, and in this regard, when this legislation was being debated in the Dáil, Paul Murphy TD made the following statement. The main thrust of the bill and the main commentary around it has rightly focused on image-based sexual abuse. However, nowhere is grossly offensive defined in such a way as to limit it to communications of a sexual nature. It is clearly much broader than that. In fact, this section as it stands could have real and damaging implications for freedom of speech because it provides that anyone who sends a grossly offensive communication to or about a person with the intent to cause harm is guilty of an offence carrying a potential sentence of up to 2 years in prison. I have two issues with that. First is the fact, as I said, that a grossly offensive communication is not defined anywhere in the bill and is therefore left to the interpretation of a judge. Second, harm is defined in the bill to include where a communication causes alarm. A judge could decide that someone online calling me or any public representative, whatever name under the sun, has been grossly offensive and alarming, and the person could be sent to prison for it. I receive my fair share of abuse on social media. I do not welcome it, but I do not think it should be criminalised. I do not think anyone should go to prison just because he or she has caused me alarm. I fear that, as drafted, this section of the bill hands a weapon to the powerful to constrain the freedom of speech of people criticising them. Now, while I do not agree with the politics of Paul Murphy, I do agree with his assessment of this law, and I have no doubt whatsoever that this law has already been used and will continue to be used as a significant tool to restrict the rights of the ordinary citizen to express their opinions freely. It's also worth being aware that a review of this legislation was published on the 27th of September 2024, and this review confirmed the following. The Act also sought to target other areas of harmful communications by creating a new offence of distributing, publishing or sending a threatening or grossly offensive communication with the intent to cause harm, and to extend the current offence of harassment to deal with communications about a person as well as communications to a person. This review also stated the offence of harassment in Section 10 of the Non-Fatal Offences Against the Person Act 1997 has been extended to include all forms of communication, including through online or digital communications to or about a person. The maximum penalty will now be 10 years imprisonment, increased from 7 years imprisonment. Finally, on the screen you can see an extract from this review which shows the number of summons and charges issued by the Gardaí between 2021 and 2023, illustrating a significant increase in charges year on year. I personally have no doubt that the number of persons charged for so-called hate speech under this legislation will increase significantly in years to come, with this opinion being reinforced by the review itself, wherein it states that An Garda Síochána anticipates that the number of prosecutions will continue to rise as further reports are received and the consequent criminal investigations progress. In conclusion, while I welcome the fact that the hate speech elements of the Criminal Justice Hate Offences Act 2022 did not pass, irrespective of this, I believe that the Gardaí have ample legislation currently at their disposal to prosecute so-called hate speech. Noting that I believe in many cases the majority of these alleged offences will be thrown out by the courts, because in most cases I do not believe that a successful prosecution is the end goal. It would obviously be welcomed. I believe the punishment is the process and the chilling effect the fear of the process will have on society at large. In many of my videos on free speech, I have ended with the same quote by Stalin, because I believe this quote embodies the essence of the need of government to crush free speech. Stalin said, "Ideas are more powerful than guns. We would not let our enemies have guns, so why would we let them have ideas?" I have said it many times in the past. Free speech is an inalienable human right and the cornerstone of democracy, and no government will restrict my right to speak. Thanks for listening.